By the time American Marines began clawing their way across the Pacific, Japan believed it understood how the enemy fought. They knew American firepower. They studied U.S. naval doctrine. They intercepted radio traffic constantly. But there was one thing they never managed to crack: the battle messages that guided American assaults through jungles, beaches, and volcanic rock. These transmissions carried troop movements, artillery coordinates, and urgent commands, sometimes deciding the outcome of an entire engagement within minutes. Japanese cryptanalysts, some of the best trained in the world, listened closely. They recorded everything. They broke other Allied codes. Yet these battle messages remained unreadable, even when captured in full. To Japanese intelligence officers, the transmissions sounded like meaningless noise, a rapid cascade of unfamiliar sounds that followed no known linguistic structure. They assumed it was a complex cipher layered on top of English. They were wrong. What they were hearing was a spoken language so rare, so precise, and so deliberately weaponized that it became one of the most effective secret systems of the Second World War, and it would change the course of battles across the Pacific. To understand why Japan failed so completely, you have to go back to a moment of desperation early in the war. After Pearl Harbor, the United States knew it faced an enemy skilled in radio interception and code breaking. Traditional encryption methods were slow, vulnerable, and increasingly compromised. In fast-moving amphibious warfare, delays of even minutes could cost hundreds of lives. Commanders needed a system that could transmit complex battle messages instantly and remain secure even if intercepted. The solution did not come from a laboratory or a codebook. It came from an idea that, at first, seemed almost too simple. A spoken language, never written down, known fluently by only a small group of people and virtually unknown outside their community. This language could be adapted, expanded, and standardized for military use without ever being translated into a conventional cipher. When the first native speakers were tested, the results were immediate and shocking. Messages that took hours to encrypt and decrypt using machines could now be transmitted, understood, and acted upon in seconds. More importantly, enemy listeners were completely locked out. Even if Japan recorded every single transmission, they still had nothing to work with. No alphabet to map, no syntax they recognized, no reference points at all. As the war escalated and the Pacific campaigns intensified, this system was no longer experimental, it became essential. Entire assaults depended on it. From chaotic beach landings to nighttime jungle advances, these battle messages flowed constantly, coordinating infantry, armor, artillery, and air support under extreme pressure. Japanese forces often knew an attack was coming but could not determine where or when. They heard the transmissions. They knew they were important, but they could not extract meaning from them. Intelligence reports described the language as primitive, random, or non-systematic, revealing a fatal misunderstanding. What Japan failed to grasp was that this was not improvisation. It was a deliberately structured battlefield language, adapted on the fly to describe modern warfare, using cultural metaphors, code substitutions, and precise verbal discipline. Every term had a purpose. Every message followed strict rules. And because it was spoken, not written, it left no captured documents to analyze. By the time Japanese commanders realized these battle messages were shaping American operations, it was already too late. The system was embedded across the Pacific, moving faster than any conventional code could be broken. And Japan was fighting a war while effectively blind to the enemy's most critical communications. The strength of the system did not lie only in secrecy, but in speed. In Pacific combat, time was everything. Beachheads were unstable, radios crackled under fire, and officers often had seconds to react before positions were overrun. Conventional encryption required encoding, transmission, reception, and decoding, each step introducing delay and risk. The battle messages spoken by the code talkers eliminated nearly all of that. A trained operator could receive an order, translate it instantly into the coded language, transmit it, and have it understood on the other end almost as fast as ordinary speech. During major assaults, hundreds of messages were sent in rapid succession, relaying changes in enemy positions, calling in artillery strikes, redirecting units, or warning of counterattacks. Japanese signal units intercepted many of these transmissions and immediately flagged them as high priority. They knew these were operational commands, but when linguists and cryptanalysts tried to analyze them, progress stopped almost immediately. The sounds did not resemble Japanese, Chinese, English, or any known European language. There was no repeating structure to exploit, no recognizable grammar, no frequency patterns that matched known alphabets. Even worse for Japan, the language itself was only the first layer. Military terms like tanks, aircraft, machine guns, and ships were never spoken directly. Instead, they were replaced with descriptive words and metaphors that made sense only to trained speakers. A fighter plane might be referred to as a bird, a battleship as a whale, a machine gun as a rapid-fire weapon animal. Without cultural context, these references were meaningless. To Japanese analysts, the messages sounded fluid and deliberate, but semantically empty. As the fighting intensified at places like Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and later Iwo Jima, the impact of these battle messages became undeniable on the ground. American units demonstrated an ability to coordinate movements with uncanny precision, even under brutal conditions. Artillery fire adjusted with speed that suggested near-instant communication. Reinforcements arrived exactly where they were needed. Japanese commanders, meanwhile, were forced to rely on delayed reports and visual confirmation, often discovering American intentions only after attacks were already underway. Attempts were made to isolate and silence the radio operators believed to be responsible, but the system was decentralized. Code talkers were embedded at multiple command levels, moving with frontline units, often operating under fire. Even if one transmitter went silent, others continued the flow of battle messages. Japan explored the possibility that the language itself could be identified and learned, but this too proved impossible. Very few non-native speakers existed, and fewer still had the fluency required to follow rapid military speech. There were no dictionaries, no grammar manuals, no written records to capture. The language lived entirely in the minds of its speakers, and those speakers were constantly adapting it, inventing new terms as the war introduced new weapons and tactics. By the time Japanese intelligence realized this was not a cipher, but a living language turned into a weapon, they faced an insurmountable problem. Learning it would take years. The war did not give them that time. Each intercepted transmission became another reminder that a critical layer of the battlefield was closed to them, leaving Japan increasingly reactive, outmaneuvered, and strategically deaf as the Pacific War moved toward its decisive phase. By 1943, Japanese intelligence officers were no longer confused. They were alarmed. Reports from the field repeatedly noted that American units appeared to coordinate attacks with a speed and accuracy that could not be explained by conventional radio procedures. Intercepted battle messages were flooding monitoring stations, yet none could be translated or exploited. Analysts attempted every known method: phonetic breakdowns, pattern recognition, cross-referencing with known operations, even the assumption that the messages were deliberately nonsensical to mask real commands sent elsewhere. All theories failed. There was no second channel. These transmissions were the commands. The problem was not encryption, it was comprehension. Unlike machine-based ciphers, this system offered no foothold. There were no captured codebooks, no predictable substitutions, no statistical weaknesses. Even when the same operational terms were used repeatedly, they did not sound the same to an outside listener. The language was rich in variation, allowing speakers to convey identical meanings using different phrasing without violating internal rules. This destroyed frequency analysis, the backbone of traditional code breaking. Japanese linguists noted that the speakers were clearly fluent, confident, and disciplined. These were not random phrases. They were deliberate, structured battle messages, but structured according to rules Japan could neither see nor reconstruct. For the first time in the war, Japanese intelligence faced a communication system that was effectively immune to interception. On the battlefield, the consequences became increasingly severe. American commanders could adapt in real time, shifting assaults, exploiting weaknesses, and responding instantly to Japanese countermeasures. During major operations, artillery fire would adjust within moments of enemy movement. Naval gunfire would be redirected with uncanny timing. Close air support arrived precisely when requested, even under chaotic conditions. Japanese officers often reported feeling as though American forces were reacting before decisions were fully executed, as if they had foreknowledge of events unfolding on the ground. In reality, they were simply operating inside a communication loop Japan could not access. Attempts to disrupt this advantage through jamming proved ineffective. The spoken language cut cleanly through interference, and even partial transmissions could often be understood by trained listeners. Captured American radio equipment revealed nothing useful: no encryption devices, no cipher wheels, no coded documents. The system existed entirely in human memory and speech. This made it resilient in a way no mechanical system could match. Even if a transmitter was destroyed or an operator killed, the knowledge itself could not be captured. New operators could step in immediately. As the war dragged on and Japan's strategic position deteriorated, the failure to break these battle messages compounded existing disadvantages. Intelligence gaps widened. Planning became increasingly reactive. Decisions were made with incomplete information while American forces operated with clarity and speed. By the time Japan fully grasped the scale of what it was facing, a battlefield language that could not be cracked, copied, or countered, the momentum of the war had already shifted irreversibly. The inability to understand these battle messages was not just a technical failure, it was a strategic blindfold, one that left Japanese commanders fighting an enemy whose most critical communications remained forever beyond their reach. As the Pacific War entered its final, brutal phase, the failure to break the battle messages carried consequences far beyond individual engagements. Japan's strategic picture grew darker with every island lost, every convoy destroyed, every counterattack anticipated and crushed. Intelligence officers increasingly understood that American command cohesion was being driven by a communication advantage they could not neutralize. Unlike radar, aircraft production, or naval tonnage, this advantage could not be bombed, blockaded, or sabotaged. It moved with the troops themselves. On islands like Saipan, Peleliu, and Okinawa, American forces coordinated landings, breakthroughs, and defensive holds with remarkable fluidity, even as terrain, weather, and casualties threatened to disrupt command structures. Japanese planners struggled to predict where the next blow would fall or how quickly American units could regroup after setbacks. The intercepted battle messages offered no clarity, only confirmation that decisions were being made faster than Japan could respond. This gap widened as American operations became increasingly complex, involving joint actions between infantry, armor, naval gunfire, and air power. Each element relied on precise timing, and that timing depended on communication Japan could neither read nor delay. What made the situation even more damaging was the psychological effect. Japanese officers knew they were missing something crucial. They sensed an unseen hand guiding American movements, yet had no way to confront it. This uncertainty eroded confidence at every level, from frontline commanders to high-level planners in Tokyo. War is not fought on material strength alone. It is fought on information. And in that domain, Japan was losing badly. When the war finally ended, the full scope of this failure became clear. Post-war analysis confirmed what Japanese intelligence had suspected too late. The battle messages they intercepted throughout the conflict were not encrypted in the traditional sense at all. They were spoken in a language Japan had never seriously studied, adapted deliberately for warfare, and protected by its own cultural complexity. Even with peacetime conditions, experts concluded that breaking such a system during active combat would have been nearly impossible. Learning the language alone would have taken years. understanding its coded military vocabulary even longer. And because it existed entirely outside machines and written records, it left nothing tangible to seize or exploit. For the United States, this system proved decisive, not because it was mysterious, but because it was human, flexible, fast, and resilient under pressure. For Japan, the inability to break these battle messages stands as one of the most complete intelligence failures of the war, not because of incompetence, but because the problem itself defied conventional solutions. It revealed a blind spot in how modern warfare was understood, that the most secure systems do not always rely on complexity, but on context, culture, and speed. Long after the guns fell silent, this lesson endured. In a conflict defined by machines, industry, and technology, one of the most effective weapons was a spoken language, carried by soldiers under fire, shaping battles in real time while remaining forever unreadable to the enemy listening in.